Welcome back. You're still watching The Globe. Now, Burundi's Constitutional Court on Friday ordered that President-elect should be sworn in as soon as possible, ending uncertainty created by the death of President Pierre Nkurunziza this week. But under the Constitution, the President of the National Assembly, Pascal Nyabenda, should take over on an interim basis before President-elect Evariste Ndayishimiye's swearing in August. Burundi's top judges said that in the constitution, the interim period under the Speaker of Parliament was designed as a time to hold fresh elections. But the President-elect's recent victory made this unnecessary. Burundi held an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Thursday to discuss a way forward after the sudden death of long-serving President Pierre Nkurunziza. He died on Monday at the age of 55 and was due to step down in August after his surprise decision not to run in an election in May won by the governing party's hand-picked successor. The country is observing a week of national mourning. Well, as we've been mentioning, Burundian flags have been flying at half-mast this week as the country continues its national mourning for the late President Pierre Nkurunziza. As people have been coming to terms with the news that shocked the nation on Monday, questions are being raised about the country's future and what effect the changing of the guard might have, not just inside the country, but the region as well. Well, to help us unpack some of these issues is the head of Puzumoya Consulting, who's a researcher, political economist who's written extensively on Burundi for more than 2 decades. Gregory Mthembu-Salter joins us now via Skype from Cape Town. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
All right, so what do you make of this period, which is quite interesting? Does the Speaker take over? Does the President-elect come into being much sooner than planned? Does it tell us a little bit more about what might be going on behind the scenes or bubbling under?
It certainly gives us some clues. It looks like the courts are siding with the General Evariste Ndayishimiye, who's one of the old guard from the days when the party was a militia in the bush and he fought alongside Nkurunziza. And the alternative, Pascal Nyabenda, doesn't have that kind of history. A possible complication is that Burundian Twitter is reporting that Ndayishimiye is being hospitalized. And the rumor is that he may have the coronavirus, with rumors swirling too that the former President Nkurunziza died of some complications arising from that. One of the difficulties with there being no international journalists in Burundi is that rumors are everywhere. It becomes very hard to verify things.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Nkurunziza. We'll talk about his legacy because that will take us through to what might happen next. When he took over, I guess he was a bit of a hero to some people, especially given what was playing out with the whole Tutsi-Hutu thing.
Yes, the irony was that in the peace process that former South African President Nelson Mandela mediated, his armed group always stayed out of the talks. But he and his party and scooped the spoils. And since then, he's certainly removed a lot of Tutsis from public life, and Hutu people have assumed leadership roles throughout the military, in the police, in the civil service. There's been pretty widespread change there. And the contest for power within the Hutu community is still unresolved, though. His supposedly defeated challenger in these last presidential elections came from another predominantly Hutu party, and that struggle does not seem to be resolved.
So what happened over time? I mean, you know, I often use, especially on our continent, a simple yardstick, how a country treats its journalists often gives us indicators about how the authorities have positioned themselves in terms of freedoms.
Well, if that's your yardstick, then it's a sorry tale.
Yeah.
Journalists have been killed. Many have fled the country. There's no freedom of the press in Burundi. There's no international media presence. Even the World Health Organization that was there to help fight the corona pandemic was kicked out prior to the elections. It's a very, very closed space.
So he was quite dictatorial by the end of his regime. What inspired that, do you think?
Well, he came from the military. His faction avoided the multi-party talks and didn't sign them. And I think that was the party from the beginning, that they would control things, and that the democratic aspect of things was seen in a kind of mystic way, that the party and later Nkurunziza himself was the voice of the people. So therefore what he wanted was what the people wanted and vice versa. So it wasn't an understanding of democracy that people in South Africa, I think, would relate to.
And people talk about a mixed legacy. There were many people who sort of fled into exile. And you hear stories about what his youth league would do, run riots and cause terror in the communities.
The youth league has been very active and has been deployed against political opponents, civil rights activists and the like. And it'll be interesting to see now whether the president-elect is able to command their loyalty. Although with Nkurunziza, the late president, dead, that will be more easy to achieve than were he still alive.
All right, let's talk about now and going into the future. Ndayishimiye looks like he's now going to be sworn in if he gets well quite quickly. What does that mean for the country? I suppose one of the challenges that he might have faced was having the shadow of the supreme leader, Pierre Nkurunziza, standing behind him, much like, I guess, the Russian president when he stood down and was prime minister for about 5 minutes. But that's not there anymore. Will he become his own man, or he's learnt a lot from his war comrade?
Well, Nkurunziza's departure makes life a lot easier for Ndayishimiye. It does enable him to carve his own way. He had been given the job of trying to reach out to partners, Western partners and regional partners who had been alienated by Nkurunziza. His hands were sort of tied in that while Nkurunziza was still president. But with him taking over, he has the opportunity to do that. At the moment, Burundi, a country that's very reliant on aid, hardly gets any at the moment because of the breakdown in relations between Burundi and most of its development partners. And I would expect that both Ndayishimiye and those partners would be keen to explore the possibility of a reset. In the region, with Rwanda, Congo, Tanzania, it's more complicated. I would imagine that Rwandan President Paul Kagame is watching developments extremely closely right now.
All right, we'll talk about the region just now, but I am intrigued by the international community. When Mr. Mnangagwa took over in Zimbabwe, there was almost a hope, and the international community were kind of wanting to embrace the change post-Mugabe era. And I wonder if that's the same for Burundi, that they hope that things might change. And will the international community come to Burundi, or is it wait and see what happens next?
They'll want to re-engage. There's always a limit. Burundi is not a particularly strategic country. It lacks natural resources, and it's often ignored by the international community. So, but things have been so bad that they will. I think there will be a hope that things pick up again now, and so they'll be looking for signals from Ndayishimiye that he is going to take a softer position than his predecessor. And if they get those signals, I think there will be a response. And Burundi is a sufficiently small country that you don't have to give it huge amounts of money to have an impact. It's not like its neighbor Congo, where you can drop billions and you hardly see it. In Burundi, you get some bang for your buck, as it were.
All right. Well, let's talk about the region now. And as you were saying, some of those countries perhaps watching with interest and hoping that things might shape in a certain way. Let's start with Rwanda. What's the relationship between Burundi and Rwanda there?
So relations are terrible. The government-controlled press in both countries regularly denounces the other side for allegedly backing anti-government militia, and there may be some truth in it. Relations are very, very poor, and the Rwandan president will be keen to see them improve, but the terms he's seeking may not be acceptable to the Burundian president. There's often been a demand from the Rwandan government that they should be able to send troops into Burundi to combat suspected rebels, and that's always been strongly resisted by Nkurunziza, and I would expect Ndayishimiye to resist it too. So we'll see whether relations really ease or not. I would say the jury's out on that one.
Do you think that Rwanda is the most difficult of the relationships in the region that Burundi needs to fix, or DRC and other countries, are they also problematic?
Well, in Congo, Nkurunziza and former Congolese President Joseph Kabila were close. They fought together in East Congo. I'm not sure if Ndayishimiye fought in East Congo too, but at any rate, he doesn't have much relationship with current President Felix Tshisekedi, who has not displayed a great deal of focus and interest in the eastern part of the country and neighboring countries so far. But there is an opportunity there for a cultivation of a relationship. It's a fresh president, and that does in itself just create opportunities, and it remains to be seen whether Tshisekedi takes it. For Tanzania, well, there are historic links between the ruling party in Burundi and the Tanzanian government. The Tanzanian government gave them refuge when they were fighting their bush war against the former Tutsi dictatorship in Burundi. So that counts for something. But whether they had developed quite a close relationship, it seems, Magufuli and Nkurunziza, and we'll have to see whether the Magufuli is willing or to attempt the same with Ndayishimiye. It's not clear yet.
All right. And then Uganda is a hopscotch away and also run by a former military man. Does that bring anything to the equation?
Well, often the rule of thumb in the Great Lakes is that my enemy's enemy is my friend. So that while relationships are strained between Museveni and Kagame, that endears Museveni to others whose relations are strained with Kagame. So that included Nkurunziza. So if tensions persist between Rwanda and Burundi, I'd imagine that the Ugandan government will be pretty friendly.
All right. So a lot of citizens left Burundi. Some for being outspoken and forced into exile. Might they be thinking about coming back, or they just see this ruling party as the one that sent them out of the country in the first instance?
Well, I'm sure, like every exile, they long to go back. They do long to go back. Now, the prudent thing would be to wait a bit. Let's see if the new president takes action to control the Youth League. Let's see if more journalists disappear. Let's see if civil rights activists disappear mysteriously. If that stops happening and reports emerge from Burundi that the so-called cashew these houses in Bujumbura that are used by the various security agencies to detain and torture suspects, if those are disbanded, the word will get out and Burundians will come back. But if that word doesn't get out, I would imagine that those exiles will stay away.
All right, and the one person we haven't spoken about is Agathon Rwasa. What happens to him now? He's contesting this election. This Pierre Nkurunziza has died. Has that changed the equation at all, or he's still out in the cold?
He's still out in the cold. I saw an interview with Ndayishimiye that he gave a couple of days ago, and he was asked about Rwasa and his challenge to the election result, and he said, well, Burundi's a family, and every family has its own idiot. So I'm not sensing great rapprochement there.
All right, so countries have been congratulating Ndayishimiye. Does that mean that he can stand almost as if he's legitimate, because there were no international observers for this election? A lot of questions raised about whether this was a legit election, but he is president.
Well, the international community swallowed a 98% victory for Kagame. They swallowed a victory for Tshisekedi when all the exit polls showed that Martin Fayulu had won the election. So, yeah, I think they'll probably accept this one too.
Yeah, and the African Union will deal with Burundi as it's always done? Or is there an opportunity now to be maybe firmer with some of the rights issues that have been raised from time to time?
Well, funnily enough, the African Union, and even at times, amazingly, the OAU before it, would take a tough line on Burundi and kind of insist that it behaved itself. And the Burundian government has always been aggrieved that it should be held to this standard when so many other countries aren't. And often relations have been a little prickly. So we'll see. If they take an overtly tough line, I would imagine Ndayishimiye will do the Burundian thing and take umbrage at this unwarranted interference at Burundi's sovereignty. But if they're accommodating and friendlier, then I'm sure they'll be welcomed.
All right. As a researcher and an analyst, people will come to you and say, what's the likely scenario for Burundi going forward? What would you say?
I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, just because things have been so bad before. If there is some resumption of development assistance and if there's a relaxation of the political repression, Burundians, amazing creative culture and community, and they're capable of great things. And if given the chance, they'll do it. And I only hope that the new president feels sufficiently secure and accommodating and aware of democratic processes that can be allowed to happen. So I live in hope.
All right, and I think all of us hope that we create the continent with the right kind of environments that we desire for all Africans. So let's keep our fingers crossed for the Burundians.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks so much indeed, Gregory Mthembu-Salter, for speaking to us from Cape Town. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.
All right.